The mop leaned quietly against the wall, forgotten for now, its handle marked by the chipped grip of 1,000 practice sessions. The air inside Valor Jiu-Jitsu smelled faintly of sweat and antiseptic, the mat scrubbed but still carrying the memory of impact. Black belts circled the floor, their movements deliberate, their footsteps soft against the yellow mat. It was the final week of black belt testing, and every corner of the room buzzed with unspoken judgment. Meera. Dalton knelt near the laundry bins with a folded GI pronounced gi resting on her lap. Her hands moved carefully, smoothing out the heavy cotton fabric, aligning sleeves, tying each belt into a clean loop. Her own belt, older than most of the candidates, sat knotted at her waist. The color had faded from years of grip drills and countless rolls, but it was tied with the same care as if she were testing today. She wasn't, not officially. Coach Pierce strode past her with a clipboard in hand, not looking down. Mascot morale still folding, he muttered to no one in particular, his voice loud enough to be heard by the brown belts warming up nearby. A few smirked. Meera didn't look up. She placed the finished ijai beside a neat row of others and reached for the next one, damp and still warm from a hard round. No one spoke to her. No one called her by name. Her station was quiet, just out of frame, as the Academy's best prepared to be watched, recorded, and ranked. But when Meera stood to collect another G, one of the newer students paused and glanced her way. Uncertain. She didn't meet his eyes. She didn't need to. Something about the way she moved had already shifted the weight of the room. The afternoon wore on in heat and repetition. Meera moved along the edge of the mat, collecting sweat-soaked G's without a word. Some were dropped at her feet with a careless flick. Others were tossed without warning, landing on her hands, shoulders, even her back. She folded each one the same way, crisp, respectful, precise, while the voices around her swelled in volume and ego. Benchwarmers still here, someone muttered from the corner. Laughter followed, soft but sharp, the kind that carried. Meera didn't react. She stacked another GI beside the bins, then stepped aside to wipe down a section of mat the brown belts had just finished drilling on. From across the room, Coach Pierce called out to a group reviewing footage. Mascot morale keeping us clean. That's half the job. Right. No one answered, but a few smiled, and one clapped Meera on the shoulder as if she were a pet. She nodded once and kept cleaning. The livestream setup began near the back wall. A tripod was adjusted, the camera operator focusing on the front mat where the black belt test rounds would happen. Red lights blinked on. The screen showed a list of names scrolling across the bottom, none of which included hers. The mic check echoed faintly across the gym final stream coming online now. Brown belt. Logan Price strolled by with his GI jacket untied, sweat pouring down his chest. He dropped the top at Meera's feet and said loud enough for others to hear. She used to train, you know. Couldn't keep up once it got real. He walked off laughing, slapping hands with a purple belt on the way. Meera folded his GI the same way she had the others. No one asked her how she felt. No one offered water or a towel. Her fingers moved through cotton and sweat, over labels and seams. A stripe fell loose from one belt, and she tied it back on before setting it aside. Around her, the gym shifted with anticipation. More people arrived visiting coaches, higher belts from out of town, even a few competitors who had flown in for the week. The air filled with the slick hiss of tape over fingers, the murmur of names and past titles, and the low bass of the speakers warming up near the live stream gear. Then the door opened, and the room tilted. Diego Cruz stepped inside like a current cutting through still water. Tall, broad, crisp in his custom black G with gold trim. He shook hands with Coach Pierce and clapped a few shoulders. Phones came out discreetly. Even some of the black belts turned toward him with subtle posture changes, nods of acknowledgement, small shifts that marked rank without saying a word. He moved with ease, greeting a few fighters by name. When he reached the edge of the mat, he slipped off his sandals and stepped onto the yellow surface like it already belonged to him. Meera stayed in her corner, folding the last of the morning's uniforms. The livestream camera adjusted, now fully trained on the champion. His name scrolled across the lower third of the stream in bold: Diego Cruz 5X IBJJF World Champion. The red light blinked steady. One of the visiting instructors asked if everything was set. Coach Pierce nodded and motioned to a spot near the front. A few more GIs hit the floor beside Meera's feet. She picked them up without breaking rhythm. Voices overlapped again, a low current of commentary Meera had heard before. She's still around. Does she work here now? Thought she was done after last year. She's not testing. Right. No. Just support. Someone opened a protein bar and tossed the wrapper near the bin. Meera picked it up too. In the middle of this, Diego walked off the mat to grab water. As he passed Meera, he didn't stop or slow. He looked down briefly, smirked, and said, "Hope you're taking notes." The line wasn't cruel. Exactly. Just casual. Dismissive. The way people talk to someone who can't talk back. It didn't earn a laugh. Only a few raised eyebrows. Even Logan, leaning against the wall, stayed quiet. Meera set the G in her hands onto the pile. She stood for a second longer than usual. The camera didn't swing to her, but it twitched. One operator adjusted the frame slightly, uncertain. She was still outside the spotlight, but for the first time all day, the lens had noticed her. No one else had, not yet. The round ended with a sharp slap on the mat and a shout for ice. One of the Academy's senior black belts limped off, clutching his shoulder, face pale under the lights. A murmur spread quickly. He wouldn't be able to continue. Coach Pierce stepped onto the mat. His expression clipped with irritation. "Where's the alternate?" he asked, scanning the line of black belts. No one moved. A few glanced down at their knees or rubbed sore wrists, unwilling to be next. Diego Cruz stood by the edge of the mat, arms crossed. Patient, but visibly amused. The camera operator whispered to an assistant, "Are we cutting or waiting?" The blinking red light stayed steady. The live stream held, the chat bar quietly filling with question marks. Coach Pierce exhaled sharply. Anyone still no takers? From the edge of the mat, Logan Price chuckled. Let the mascot do it. A ripple of laughter rolled through the room, thin and uncomfortable. Meera didn't flinch. Pierce turned toward her, expression unreadable. "Fine. Meera. Step in." He shrugged, as if it meant nothing. The reaction was instant. A few raised eyebrows. One purple belt muttered, "He's joking." Right. But no one stopped her. No one objected. Meera stood without a word. She placed the folded G she had been holding on top of the pile. Then she pulled her own jacket from the hook behind her, slipping it on with quiet precision. The fabric clung slightly from the heat of the room. Her belt, aged and pale, tied clean and sharp across her waist. She stepped barefoot across the edge of the mat, her movements unhurried. The floor was warm beneath her soles. A few of the lower belts snickered. Logan leaned against the wall, watching with half a grin. The camera twitched and widened its frame. A new tag appeared on the stream overlay. Unexpected guest. One of the operators adjusted the focus as Meera entered the shot. Diego tilted his head slightly, still smiling. "You sure?" he asked, not unkindly. Meera bowed. Her hands rested at her sides. No nod, no words. The gym went still. Even the casual laughter faded into an odd quiet. It wasn't reverence. It wasn't fear. It was the silence of something not yet understood. Coach Pierce folded his arms and stepped back. The red light on the live stream blinked again, this time aimed squarely at the center mat. Meera took her place across from Diego. Her belt lay flat against her hip, her posture centered. She bowed once more, then looked up. The moment held. No sound, no signal. Only the empty space between two fighters, one world-renowned, one forgotten, now facing each other beneath lights neither of them controlled. The two fighters circled once, barefoot on the mat. Diego moved first, a light grip on Meera's collar, his weight easy, uncommitted. It was the kind of motion used in seminars to demonstrate flow, not threat. Meera matched the pace without flair. She didn't resist. She didn't posture. Her hands moved in time with his, soft and exact, as if she were fitting pieces back into place. Diego reached for a simple lapel drag, then transitioned to a knee tap. Meera turned with it. Her footwork was sound, invisible, like breath. Her shoulder dipped beneath his grip, and suddenly her hips shifted behind his. There was no pause, no resistance. She was just there. Her left arm slipped under his, the hook set without tension. Diego rolled to the side, adjusting. It should have broken the grip, but it didn't. Meera floated with the movement, anchored by precision rather than strength. Her knee followed. She latched her second hook, and Diego's body stiffened. For the first time, his eyes focused. He brought his chin down, protecting the collar. Meera didn't reach across. She didn't rush. Her right hand rose, calmly taped fingers pressing along the fold of his lapel, and began to feed it through with one clean motion. He tried to turn again. Too late. Her grip locked. The gym was quiet. Diego's hand hovered, searching for wrist control. Meera's legs tightened slightly, just enough to draw his posture forward. She adjusted by a few inches. Her knuckles pressed into the base of his neck, steady and small. He tapped. Once. Sharp and clean. No one moved. Meera didn't let go. The mat stayed silent. Coach Pierce stepped forward, his voice sharp. Release! Only then did Meera ease her grip. Her hand slipped away like it had never been there. Diego sat upright, breathing hard. His gi had twisted, and his belt hung loose around his waist. Meera stood without a sound. The camera caught it all. The red light stayed fixed, the live stream counter rising behind the focus box. Diego pushed to his feet slowly. He didn't look at her. His face was unreadable. He turned and walked to the edge of the mat, his hand resting on his collar, his head slightly bowed. Meera adjusted her belt. Her expression hadn't changed. She stepped back to her mark and bowed. No one clapped. No one spoke. Coach Pierce said nothing. The other athletes watched from the wall, still and uncertain. A few exchanged looks. One brown belt folded his arms across his chest. Another stepped back without realizing it. Meera's taped fingers hung loosely at her sides. The same hand that had locked the choke, now relaxed. The mat looked different. The air felt dense, like something had entered the room no one could explain. The camera shifted, trying to find a new angle. The frame widened again to include her face, then zoomed out as if distance might restore control. She stepped off the mat, unhurried. No bowed heads followed her. No applause. Just breath. The live stream chat began to spike. What just happened? Is this a joke? Was that a setup replay now? Inside the gym. No one answered. Meera moved past the line of observers without looking up. She walked back toward the bench where the folded G's waited. Her hand brushed one by habit. She didn't pick it up. Diego sat near the wall, his hands resting on his knees. His breathing had slowed, but he hadn't moved since the choke. Coach Pierce still hadn't said anything. The camera light blinked. The counter passed 90,000. Somewhere near the back of the gym, a water bottle dropped and rolled across the floor. No one reached for it. The silence held longer than it should have. The tension didn't fade. It settled. No music played. No instructions were called. Even the newest white belt stood still. Then someone, low and unsure, whispered just above the hush. Was that real? No one moved. Not at first. The room was still suspended in silence, the kind that clung to the walls after something irreversible. Coach Pierce looked down at the mat, then toward the live stream crew behind the camera rig. One of the operators raised his hand but didn't speak. The red light on the lens stayed solid. No one called for a reset. Diego Cruz remained seated near the edge, one knee raised, both hands resting on it. His breathing had calmed, but not his expression. He wasn't confused. He was processing. A low murmur started near the back corner of the gym. Two purple belts exchanged short words. Then one brown belt stood and stepped toward the center of the mat. I'll go, he said, gesturing toward Meera. Next round. Coach Pierce gave a nod. Meera didn't. She bowed once, respectful, and replied, I'm not here to test. There was no edge in her voice, just finality. The brown belt hesitated. Another black belt stepped forward, adjusting his cuffs. "Let her run it back," he said. That wasn't a real match. He wasn't ready. Meera turned toward them but said nothing. She bowed again and took a step back. Coach Pierce's voice cut through. "You are now—" It didn't sound like a command, more like an acknowledgement. Meera didn't respond. She turned and began walking toward the edge of the mat. The crowd shifted without being told. They parted as she passed, stepping aside in silence. The camera adjusted to follow her. The frame widened slightly, keeping her in view from behind. Her belt was still tied. Her taped hand rested loosely at her side. The counter on the live stream climbed steadily. 8,000, 13,000, 27,000. Every few seconds, a new spike hit the feed. Comments rolled in beneath the screen. "Who is she? That wasn't luck. Rewind. Now. Replay choke. Someone name her. This is real." Outside the gym, phones buzzed. Screens lit up. A sports account reposted the stream with the caption, "Unknown woman submits Diego Cruz." Live stream's still up. It crossed 100,000 views within minutes. Back inside, Diego remained seated. His belt still hung uneven, and a dark spot of sweat spread across his shoulder. He hadn't spoken since the tap. A visiting coach approached Meera as she neared the exit. "Where'd you train?" he asked. She paused, offered a polite nod, then kept walking. No answer. The camera stayed with her. Not because she asked, because it had nowhere else to look. "In the control booth," one of the techs whispered. "Do we cut it?" Another replied, "You really want to be the one who ends this." More black belts lined up by the wall, but none stepped onto the mat. They waited, watching. Meera didn't turn back. Outside, someone clipped the choke and uploaded it with the caption, "One hand, no reset." It hit 250,000 views before the hour turned. Inside the gym, the lights remained unchanged. The mats looked exactly the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Coach Pierce stood with his hands at his hips, watching Meera walk. He said nothing. His face was unreadable. The silence had changed tone. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was respectful, careful. The comments kept coming. "What's her name?" That wasn't luck. That was cold. "Has she competed?" "Let her test." That wasn't even a fight. That was something else. Meera paused once to slide her sandals back on. She didn't rush. She didn't wave or speak. As she stepped past the final row of chairs, the camera didn't blink. The red light stayed steady. The counter ticked upward. 70,000, 90,000, 120,000. She passed through the open door, the late afternoon sun lighting the back of her gi. The fabric rippled gently as she moved forward, her shadow stretching just ahead of her. Someone near the front of the gym whispered her name for the first time that day. Just Meera, nothing more. No one responded, but everyone heard it. The camera held its frame a few seconds longer, focused on the open space she left behind. Then, just before the screen dimmed, the counter passed 200,000. The feed faded to black. No music, no outro, just silence. The lights were already on when Meera entered the gym the next morning. The mats had been swept, and the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and tape glue. No one else had arrived yet. She walked toward the testing board, its surface lined with names in black marker. The handwriting was neat, measured, unmistakably Coach Pierce's. Her name was at the bottom of the list now. Meera Dalton added cleanly, with no hesitation in the stroke. She stood there for a moment, reading it once. Then she turned away and began wrapping her fingers, one at a time, the same way she always had. The tape stuck to her skin just as it had the day before. Coach Pierce entered through the back door, clipboard in hand. He stopped when he saw her. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he walked over and extended a hand. "Morning," he said. She nodded. She didn't take his hand. He let it fall and didn't push the gesture further. "Test is at 10. He added. "Lineups posted." Meera nodded again. He stepped aside. She passed him without comment. A few minutes later, others began arriving. They didn't speak to her directly. but they moved around her carefully. The usual chatter was muted, the energy quieter than before. When Diego Cruz arrived, the room stilled slightly. He walked toward her at a deliberate pace. There was no smile, no swagger. He bowed at the waist. "If I'd known who you were," he said, voice even. Meera looked at him for the first time that day. "You didn't ask." He nodded. Then he stepped aside. No one laughed. No one filled the silence with noise. She walked to the bench and pulled her GI top from her bag. The fabric was still stiff from drying overnight. She slipped it on slowly and pulled her belt into place. Her belt didn't shake when she tied it. The knot sat perfectly flush against her waist. Her hands didn't fumble. In the locker room, the pile of uniforms she'd folded yesterday was still neatly stacked. No new ones had been tossed carelessly. Everyone had folded their own. Meera stepped onto the mat. The others formed a line, each belt rank standing in quiet order. No one looked away. She stood at the center, near the edge where the instructors usually started warm-up. No one told her to move. Coach Pierce stayed near the back. He watched, arms crossed, without correcting her position. Meera bowed to the room. Not everyone bowed back, but no one looked away. One white belt glanced toward the door, uncertain. A brown belt gave him a quiet nod, signaling to stay focused. Meera dropped to one knee and adjusted her belt again, not because it needed fixing, just to mark the beginning of something new. The tape on her fingers caught the light. Her breath stayed steady. The room remained still. The mat beneath her had held 100 names before hers. Today, it would carry one more. No one spoke her name. They didn't need to. The list had said enough. The ink hadn't faded. The late-day light spilled in through the high windows, casting soft gold across the edge of the mat. Meera stood near the laundry bins again, the same spot where everything had started. Her sleeves were rolled, her posture quiet. A white belt finished his round and, without thinking, tossed his gi in her direction. The motion was casual, unconscious. The fabric sailed toward the floor. Meera caught it midair. Her hand moved without urgency, just a clean intercept. She turned her head slightly, eyes calm but direct. "You fold your own," she said. The white belt froze. His mouth opened, then shut. He stepped forward, picked up the GI from her hand, and backed away in silence. No one laughed. No one explained. The room had already learned what it needed to. Behind Meera, the wall bore a new addition. A framed photograph, mounted just above eye level. It showed her in full control, arm hooked tight across Diego Cruz's collar. Her taped fingers were visible, precise and still. The image had been taken seconds before the tap. Beneath it, a small plaque was bolted into the frame. The lettering was plain. Black Belt 273, passed without testing. No spotlight shone on it. No announcement had been made, but everyone knew when it went up. No one had to say who approved it. Near the live stream monitor, a small screen displayed the final viewer count, 1.2 million. The number ticked upward once more before fading to standby. The red light on the camera had been turned off, but no one looked away from Meera now. She turned back to the mat. Her GI was clean. Her belt sat firm around her waist. She didn't speak again. She didn't move. The gym remained still. The sound of breath and movement held just beneath the surface. She stood beneath her own photo, not proud, not distant, just there. No one asked her to explain. No one dared. The room didn't return to normal. It shifted. And Meera didn't have to do anything else. Sometimes the strongest presence in the room is the one no one noticed until they had no choice. Meera Dalton was dismissed, overlooked, and pushed to the margins. Yet she never asked for recognition. She simply stayed. She watched. And when the moment came, she answered it with calm precision that left the world silent. This is a story about quiet strength, earned self-respect, and the dignity of knowing who you are long before anyone else does. Meera didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight for the spotlight. She just moved with purpose, and that was enough. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Maybe share it with someone who's been underestimated. And if you want more stories where quiet resilience changes everything, feel free to follow and let us know what spoke to you most in the comments.